In a dusty village, they called him Dirty Dennis, a crippled beggar scorned and spat upon by all. Yet Ruth, a young woman with little to her name, dared to see the man beneath the grime, offering him kindness when no one else would. What happens when her selfless acts unravel a shocking secret? Brace yourself for a heartwarming tale of compassion, hidden truths, and a twist that will leave you speechless. Dive into the story of Ruth and Dennis, where love and kindness rewrite destinies, that he was known as Dirty Dennis, a disabled man constantly begging along the dusty roadside. People would spit near him and toss scraps of food, treating him as less than human. Yet, a young woman named Ruth, impoverished but compassionate, did what no one else had the courage to do. She offered him kindness without expecting anything in return. What followed? Let's just say kindness has a way of returning unexpectedly. Settle in, relax, and dive into this heartfelt story of humility, hidden truths, and a surprising twist that will leave you amazed. Let the tale unfold. Ruth wiped sweat from her brow and set another plate of food on the wooden table for a patron. She'd been working tirelessly since dawn, yet she greeted every customer with a smile. Ruth had lost everything. Her father passed away when she was just 10. Her mother, her only solace, succumbed to a brief illness 2 years later, leaving Ruth bewildered. She stumbled into Madame T's food canteen, drenched, frail, and trembling. Madame T eyed her warily. "Who are you?" she snapped. "Here to beg for food?" With tears in her eyes and a voice barely audible, Ruth replied, "Please, Ma, I'm not asking for food. I need work. I can clean dishes or sweep. I just want to earn my own meal." Madame T laughed and dismissed her, but Ruth returned day after day until Madame T, exasperated by her persistence, finally said, "All right, clean the back dishes." She was only 21. Her beauty was understated. Smooth, dark skin, gentle eyes, and a soothing voice that calmed even the grumpiest patrons. But her kindness stood out most. Despite her meager earnings and humble one-room home, she always found ways to help others. "Ruth, you're too slow. I asked for pepper soup, not jollof rice," Madame T, the canteen's owner, yelled. "I'm sorry, Ma. I'll fix it right away," Ruth answered softly, rushing back. Madame T scoffed. "You think this is a charity? Shape up." Just then, the creak of worn rubber wheels scraping across sand echoed. Heads turned. It was Dennis, the crippled beggar. He slowly maneuvered his rusted, broken wheelchair toward the canteen's entrance. His clothes, tattered and dirty, hung loosely on his thin frame. His legs, frail, twisted, and lifeless, lay like discarded wood on the footrest. He paused a few feet from the entrance, silent, just watching. A woman by the window hissed and looked away. A customer snickered. "Dirty Dennis is back. Did the gutter kick him out?" Another covered her food with her wrapper, muttering, "He reeks of stale drain water." Ruth's heart sank. She gazed at him, not with pity, but with quiet empathy. She saw the person, not the wheelchair or the grime, just a hungry, lonely man. Dennis lingered by the canteen's side, quietly eyeing the yam peels and bones near the trash. Each time Ruth saw him, her heart ached a little more. People treated him like garbage, but she saw a human being, starving and alone. She quietly prepared a plate of rice, beans, and a piece of meat, approached him, and knelt beside him. "Here, sir, please take this." Dennis blinked and looked at her. "You again?" Ruth smiled. "Eat before it cools." Madame T spotted her and erupted. "Ruth, are you insane? This isn't a soup kitchen for crazy, crippled men." The canteen roared with laughter. Ruth stood silently, saying nothing. Dennis ate slowly, his eyes moist with a feeling he hadn't known in years, kindness. And so it all began. After the last patron left and the tables were cleared, Madame T sat on her plastic chair, chewing sugarcane. "Look at you," she said, glaring at Ruth coldly. "Wasting food, feeding a beggar daily like you're his mother." Ruth stood quietly, hands clasped. "I'll take it out of your wages. Is this your family's kitchen? That Dennis is cursed. Why do you think he's crippled and poor? He must have done evil in a past life. Let him pay for it. Ruth swallowed hard. But, Madam, he's hungry, and no one helps him. Madam T slammed her cane on the table. So what? There are plenty of hungry people. You want to save them all. She stood and confronted Ruth. If I catch you feeding him again, you're gone. I'll fire you. Ruth nodded silently, holding back tears. Ruth walked home, her stomach empty but her heart heavy. Not for herself, but for Dennis. What had his life been like before? How'd he end up this way? Why was everyone so cruel? Passing by Dennis, curled up on a wooden bench by the trash bin, she paused. He was shivering, even in the warm night air. She had no food, but she removed her scarf and gently draped it over him. He said nothing, but he never forgot it. Ruth avoided bringing food from the canteen to avoid being fired, but she had some leftover gari at home. She soaked it with sugar that morning and poured it into a small cup. When Dennis limped toward the canteen again, Ruth slipped outside with the cup. I don't have much today, she whispered. But please drink this. Dennis took it with trembling hands. Why? Why do you keep doing this? He asked, his voice shaky. Ruth sat beside him on the pavement. Because I know what it's like to have nothing. It's the right thing to do. He stared at her for a long moment. What if I told you I'm not what I seem? Ruth laughed softly. Then you're like everyone else. No, Dennis said slowly, his voice deeper. One day, you'll see, and you'll remember this gari. Ruth smiled, thinking he was just grateful. But she didn't know a secret lay behind those weary eyes, one that would transform her life forever. Ruth sat in the canteen's smoky kitchen, peeling yams with a dull knife. Her fingers were blistered, and the fire's heat stung her skin like a punishment. She hadn't eaten since the previous day, and her stomach rumbled softly. Madam T's voice echoed from inside. Ruth, where's the pepper? Are you napping back there? Coming on. Ruth replied quietly, wiping her eyes. She wasn't crying from hunger or heat. She cried because she'd seen Madam T dump a full plate of untouched jollof rice into the bin after a customer complained it was cold. She pictured Dennis starving on a bench somewhere. She stepped behind the building, away from the smoke, and let her tears flow freely. She didn't know why she cared so deeply. Perhaps it was because she, too, had begged for help after her mother's death, sitting under a mango tree, starving and alone, until an old woman gave her a banana and water. Now, she was becoming that woman for Dennis. Ruth, a voice called. She looked up. A boy selling sachet water stood there. That man you feed asked me to give you this. He handed her a small note. In shaky handwriting, it read, Thank you for feeding me when others gave me insults. You don't know it yet, but one day you'll dine like royalty. Ruth folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket like a precious gem. She had no clue how prophetic those words would prove. While serving beans to a customer, a group of teenage girls burst into the canteen, laughing boisterously. There's the beggar's wife, one shouted. Auntie Ruth, the cleaner, lover of filthy, crippled men. The room exploded in laughter. Ruth froze, her face burning with shame. She tried to ignore them, continuing to serve, her hands shaking. But the girls pressed on. She's probably saving her wages to marry him, one jeered. They'll honeymoon by that dustbin. Maybe he writes her love notes on plastic bags. Another mocked, cackling. Madam T emerged, hands on hips. What's this racket? One girl said, Madam T, warn your worker before her crippled lover drives away your customers. Ruth stood still, biting her lip to hold back tears. Madam T glared at her with disdain. Ruth, don't disgrace me. I've warned you. Stay away from that beggar, or pack up and leave. Ruth bowed her head. Yes, Ma. Passing Dennis's usual spot, she found him lying in the dust, his shirt soaked from a sachet water bag someone had thrown at him. She knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. Why do people hate you so much? He looked up, lips cracked. Because I remind them of what they dread, being forgotten. Ruth pulled a loaf of bread from her small nylon bag, saved from her own meager supplies. She broke it in half and gave him a piece. You're not forgotten. He smiled faintly. Neither are you. While sweeping the canteen's front, Ruth heard a low hum growing louder from the road. She looked up to see a gleaming black Jeep rolling slowly down the dusty path. The vehicle was so pristine and grand it seemed out of place. Children chased it, barefoot, shouting, "Car! Car! Big car!" The Jeep stopped in front of Madam T's canteen. Its engine purred softly, and a moment later, the door opened. An elegant woman, perhaps in her late 50s, stepped out. Her skin glowed, draped in a golden lace wrapper that shimmered in the sunlight. She wore matching heels and clutched a delicate handbag. Everyone stared. Even Madam T dropped her broom. "My God, who's this?" someone whispered. The wealthy woman adjusted her bag and entered the canteen, her eyes quietly scanning the space. She spoke little, nodding politely as she sat at a corner table. Madam T rushed to her like a moth to a flame. "Welcome, Ma. You're so welcome. What can I get you?" "Hot jollof rice, fresh catfish pepper soup, pounded yam." "Anything, Ma." The woman smiled gently. "Just white rice and stew. No meat. No meat." Madam T blinked, surprised. "Yes, Ma." As Ruth turned to fetch the plate, she noticed something odd. The woman was staring at someone outside. She followed her gaze to Dennis, sitting by his usual bench near the trash bin, looking as always, dusty, hunched, tired, ignored. A fly rested on his shoulder, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. The woman's gaze lingered on him, her head tilted slightly, as if trying to recall something. Ruth stood still, a strange silence settling over the scene. Then the woman looked back at her food, her expression soft but unreadable. She said nothing about Dennis, simply picking up her spoon to eat slowly. Ruth served her quietly, standing by the wall, puzzled by the woman's stare. There was something in her look, almost recognition. After a while, the woman stood, paid with crisp new bills, and said softly, "The food was wonderful. Thank you." As she turned to leave, her eyes met Ruth's. "You're the one who gave him bread yesterday, aren't you?" she asked. Ruth's eyes widened. "Yes, I just thought. He looked hungry." The woman nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "May your heart always stay full." She stepped into her car, the door closing softly, and the Jeep drove off, leaving a thin trail of dust. Dennis hadn't spoken or looked up, but something about him had shifted. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight. Ruth watched him from afar, sensing a quiet storm brewing, unseen but certain. She couldn't explain it, but she knew they'd see that woman again. Madam T began watching Ruth like a predator. A glance toward Dennis brought a sharp warning or a slap on the back. Yet Ruth found ways to help. After work, she'd wrap leftovers in her scarf, sometimes rice, sometimes plain yam porridge, and stop by Dennis casually. She'd kneel beside him in the sand, offering the food. "Here," she'd say softly. "It's not much, but it's for you." Dennis took it with shaky hands, his voice low like a breeze through dry leaves. "You don't have to do this," he said one evening. "Why do you keep coming back?" Ruth shrugged gently. "Someone fed me when I was starving. I never forgot." Dennis looked at her, eyes watery. "But you barely have enough for yourself." She smiled faintly. "That doesn't mean I should stop giving." Village gossip grew louder. People mocked her, whispering and laughing. "That's the girl who feeds the crippled beggar. She'll end up like him, starving and crawling. Maybe she dreams he'll marry her someday." Ruth pretended not to hear, keeping her eyes down and working diligently, sweeping and wiping tables. But her heart ached. A girl in a bright pink dress entered the canteen with friends, ordering drinks and laughing loudly. When Ruth brought their cups, one spilled her drink on the table and sneered, "Oops, sorry. You don't mind cleaning that, do you? You're used to cleaning dirty things like Dennis." The girls laughed. Ruth froze, hands trembling. Madam T, overhearing, laughed too. "True, Ruth. Your friend smells like dead rats." Passing Dennis's spot, Ruth found him lying quietly, face to the wall. "I brought food," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He didn't respond. She touched his arm. He turned, eyes weary, not from hunger, but shame. "They mock you because of me." Ruth shook her head. "No, they mock me because their hearts are empty." She set the food beside him. "But mine isn't, and neither is yours." Dennis stared, eyes intense, lips tight. Then he whispered words she'd never forget. "You've given me more than food. You've restored my dignity." The next day, after work, Ruth returned home soaked. Her slippers were torn, her bag drenched. Madam T had sent her on a late errand, making her walk far in the rain. Passing Dennis's corner, she stopped. He was shivering, his shirt clinging like wet paper, legs curled up, water streaming down his face. Ruth had no food, money, or shelter to offer, but she had her scarf, blue, soft, a gift from her late mother. She removed it, ignoring the biting wind, and wrapped it around Dennis's shoulders. He looked up, surprised. "No, you'll get sick." "I'm fine," she said gently. "I'm strong. You need this more." She sat beside him on the wet ground, leaning against the wall, arms crossed to keep warm. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Dennis whispered, "If I were a king, I'd crown you queen today." Ruth smiled, teeth chattering. "Kings don't sit by trash bins." Dennis turned to her, shadows hiding the intensity in his eyes. "Don't be so certain." Ruth swept the canteen and set tables as usual, her hands shaky from weakness, but she forced a smile. The place was busier than usual. Madam T was cheerful until she noticed something. Dennis sat quietly outside, still weak, wrapped in Ruth's scarf. Madam T's mood soured. "Ruth," she barked. "Come here." Ruth dropped her tray and hurried over. "Madam." Madam T pointed outside. "Is that my scarf?" "No, Ma. It's mine," Ruth said softly. "Your scarf on that crippled thing? You're clothing him now." "It was raining, Ma. He was cold. So you turned your mother's scarf into a rag for that dirty Dennis?" Customers glanced over. One laughed. "That girl's possessed. She loves a beggar." Madam T's eyes blazed. "You're shameless, turning my canteen into a charity show. Feeding him my food, now dressing him." "I use my own food, Ma," Ruth said, tears welling. "My own things." Madam T shouted, "Quiet. I warned you. Pack up and leave. You're fired." The words hit like a thunderbolt. Customers gasped. Ruth stood frozen. "Madam, please," she whispered. "This job is all I have." "Then go work for your crippled husband," Madam T snapped, tossing a rag at her feet. Ruth felt the ground sway beneath her. Her legs barely held her. She walked out, tears streaming silently. She'd lost everything for a man with nothing. Ruth didn't go home. She wandered for hours, unsure of her next step. Her small savings had gone to food for Dennis and medicine for her recent fever. She sat on a low cement block by a bush path, watching the sky turn orange. The pain in her chest wasn't just hunger. It was the sting of being mocked for doing good, the shame of being ridiculed for caring. Passing Dennis's spot, she saw him sitting there, still in her scarf. He sat up when he saw her. "Ruth," he called. She didn't answer. He tried to stand, but stumbled. She rushed to steady him. "Where were you?" he asked. I was fired," she whispered. Dennis's eyes widened. "Because of me?" Ruth nodded, looking away. "I told you I'm not worth it," he said, voice breaking. Ruth turned to him, eyes fierce yet gentle. "That's not true. Everyone deserves kindness." She pulled the last loaf of bread from her plastic bag. "I haven't eaten today," she said, handing it to him. "But this is for you." He stared, speechless. "You've given me everything," he whispered. "I have nothing to give back." Ruth smiled faintly, lips trembling. "Kindness isn't a transaction. I don't give to gain." Dennis took the bread, hands shaking, broken in half, and gave her a piece. They ate silently on the old bench as the sky darkened. Sometimes love isn't flowers or gold. It's two broken souls sharing bread in silence. Ruth couldn't face her silent, hungry room, haunted by Madam T's shouts, so she stayed with Dennis. The bench was rough and narrow, but she sat beside him, arms crossed, head against the wall. "You can't sleep here," he said. "I don't want to be anywhere else," she replied softly. He looked away, guilt consuming him. "I should have stopped you. You lost everything because of me." "You don't get it," she whispered. "I didn't lose anything. I gained peace." Dennis stared, speechless. She smiled weakly, holding back tears. "This is the first time I feel I did something right, even if it cost everything." The wind blew softly. The moon peeked through a cloud. Dennis removed the scarf from his shoulders and wrapped it around her. "I can't give you a bed," he said, "but you shouldn't be cold." Ruth looked at him, seeing a spark in his eyes, not poverty or pain, but hidden strength waiting to awaken. 3 days after losing her job, Ruth scraped by with odd tasks, fetching water, sweeping market stalls, anything to survive. Food was scarce. One warm afternoon, under the mango tree near the canteen, a man stepped out of a black SUV. Tall, in black native attire and dark glasses, he moved with quiet confidence, scanning the area. Everyone stared. He approached an orange seller and asked, "I'm looking for a young woman named Ruth." She pointed. "That's her." Ruth stood alarmed. The man approached, bowed slightly, and said, "Madam Ruth, I'm Santo, sent by Mr. Dennis. He wishes to see you privately now." Ruth blinked. "Dennis sent you?" "Yes," Santo said. "He asked me to bring you safely. Please follow me." The crowd murmured as Ruth entered the cool, perfumed car. Her heart raced. "Where are we going?" she asked nervously. Santo smiled gently. "To meet the real Dennis." The car left the village, driving onto a smooth, tarred road Ruth had never seen. After 30 minutes, they entered a private estate with tall gates, security lights, and towering trees. The car stopped before a mansion. Santo opened the door. Ruth stepped out, awestruck, marble tiles, gold railings, flower gardens. Santo led her through pristine hallways to a spacious sitting room. There sat Dennis in a fitted caftan, clean-shaven, no rags or flies, standing with pride despite his limp. "Dennis," she whispered. He stood slowly, smiling. "Yes, Ruth, it's me." Her legs weakened. He took her hand. "Sit. I owe you the truth." She sat, eyes locked on him. Dennis spoke. "I'm not poor. I never was. I'm Dennis Okonkwo, owner of this estate and businesses in Lagos, Abuja, and Ghana. Years ago, an accident took my legs' mobility and my trust in people." He paused. "I disguised myself, left my empire to managers, and lived among the poor to see if anyone could care for me, not my wealth or name." He looked in her eyes. "And you did, Ruth. You fed me your last food, gave me your only scarf, shared your bread, sat with me when they called me Dirty Dennis. You lost your job for me." Tears streamed down Ruth's face. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't do it for reward." "I know," Dennis said, kneeling before her. "That's why I'm honoring you." He pointed to a file on the table. "I've funded your culinary studies abroad. Your cooking has heart. I want the world to taste it. You leave in 2 weeks, all expenses paid. And when you return," he smiled, "I'll be here." Ruth sobbed, not for the money or surprise, but because someone saw her value without her pleading for it. 2 weeks later, Akuna village watched in disbelief as Ruth, in a new dress with a suitcase, entered a private car. Some laughed in shame, others clapped quietly, but none called her Auntie Dennis anymore. She gazed out the window as the car drove off, eyes radiant with peace. She was headed to South Africa to study at a top culinary school, a dream she'd never dared to have. Years passed, 2, then 3. Ruth returned, stronger, wiser, glowing, but her heart unchanged. Dennis greeted her at the airport with flowers. His limp had improved post-surgery, his love for her deepened. He opened a grand restaurant for her, Ruth's Kitchen of Mercy. Every dish carried her kindness. Staff were well paid. Weekly, free meals were served to the poor, just as she'd fed Dennis. No cameras, no rewards, just love. People wondered, how did a canteen girl become a renowned chef? She smiled, because kindness is never wasted, and so began their forever. Ruth's Kitchen of Mercy became the city's talk, not just for its food, but its heart. Each morning, Ruth tasted every dish herself. Her voice was gentle, her presence calming. She knew every staff member's name, from janitors to head chefs, treating them like family. Every Thursday, she and her team packed trays of jollof rice, moi, beans soup, and water, heading to streets, under bridges, behind markets. They served children with swollen bellies, weary old men, women with infants, the forgotten. Ruth knelt before each. "This is for you," she'd say. "You matter. You're not alone." Some cried, some prayed, some stared in disbelief. They called her the angel with the apron, but Ruth stayed humble, remembering her hungry days, the bench, the scarf, the egg she shared with a man she thought had nothing. She never expected that man to enter her restaurant one Saturday with a secret plan. The restaurant buzzed with customers, couples, politicians, celebrities, even village women who came to see Ruth. She was in the kitchen, shaping meat pies, laughing with staff, when her manager rushed in. "Madam Ruth, come to the main hall." Wiping her hands, she stepped out, puzzled. The lights dimmed. A violin played softly. Dennis stood in the center, radiant despite his limp, holding a white rose. Ruth's heart stopped. The room fell silent. Phones flashed, staff smiled, some customers teared up. "Dennis," she whispered. He stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. "Ruth," he began, voice trembling, "I entered your life with nothing. No home, no name, no dignity. You gave me more than food, dignity, hope, love, expecting nothing." A tear rolled down Ruth's cheek. "You showed me kindness outshines wealth, that love lives in gari and groundnut. You knelt by a beggar others scorned. Now, he knelt, the room gasping. Let me kneel by you forever." He opened a box, a gold ring gleaming. "Ruth, will you marry me?" Her lips quivered. She covered her mouth, sobbing. The crowd held its breath. "Yes," she cried. "Yes, Dennis." Cheers erupted. Ruth fell into his arms, both crying, the room sharing their tears. The beggar and the canteen girl became a couple that inspired the world. Their wedding was simple yet beautiful. The media dubbed it the year's greatest love story, but for Ruth, it was home. Their home overflowed with laughter, cooking, music, prayers, and love. Ruth gave birth to a daughter, named Mercy after what saved her life. Dennis held her, tears falling. "She'll grow up knowing kindness," Ruth whispered, exhausted but smiling. "And we'll never let her forget our roots." Their journey from bench to banquet was tough, but they persevered, never ceasing to give. Nearly a year after their wedding, the restaurant thrived, and Mercy began walking. Love filled their home like sunlight. While serving at their new shelter kitchen in a nearby village, Ruth heard a voice. "Ruth." She turned. It was Madame T, older, frail, thinner, her fine wrappers gone, eyes sunken. Ruth froze, recalling the shouts, insults, and her firing for helping a beggar. "I heard you own a restaurant," Madame T said, voice cracking. "And you help people. I was wrong. I judged and mocked you. Now life has turned on me. My canteen closed. My daughter took my savings and fled. I have nothing." Ruth stared, stunned. "Please," Madame T whispered. "I haven't eaten today. Can I have something?" Ruth looked at the tray she held, then at the woman who once broke her spirit. She handed her rice, meat, and cold water. Madame T took it, hands trembling, tears falling. "You're still kind," she said. "After everything." Ruth smiled gently, eyes shining. "Kindness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it." Madame T collapsed, weeping. Ruth knelt and hugged her, healing something deep in both. Forgiveness is a mighty form of love. For their one-year anniversary, Ruth and Dennis did something unique. No lavish chairs or speeches. They closed the restaurant for a day of gratitude and giving. Instead of elites, they invited street widows, orphans new to restaurants, old beggars who knew Dirty Dennis, children who once scavenged crumbs. They laughed, ate, danced. Ruth wore a simple Ankara dress. Dennis held Mercy. Ruth served, saying, "Eat, uncle. Eat, mama. There's plenty." Some wept, some prayed, some smiled in disbelief. A reporter covering the event asked Ruth, "Why this crowd? Why not something grander?" She replied, "Because I was once hungry, and someone saw me." Her words aired on radio and TV, moving the nation. But Ruth cared not for fame, only for people, and that made all the difference. Ruth sat by the window, watching Mercy sleep peacefully. Stars twinkled outside as Dennis entered with 2 cups of warm tea. He sat beside her. "Can I share something I've never told anyone?" Ruth nodded. His eyes softened. "The first day you gave me food, I decided to end my life." Ruth's heart stopped. I'd lost all hope, believing the world had no place for me. Then you, with your small hands and tired eyes, gave me your food. He paused. "You saved me, Ruth, not just with rice or scarf, but with love." Ruth gripped his hand, tears falling. "And you," she whispered, "gave me my life back. I thought I'd die behind a canteen table, but you saw my worth too." Dennis kissed her hand. "We were two broken pieces, but together we're a masterpiece." They sat silently, hearts united. Outside, the wind whispered through trees. Inside, their home glowed with warmth, memories, and mercy. Dear listener, Ruth and Dennis's story is more than fiction. It reminds us kindness is never wasted. You may have little, feel unseen, weary, mocked, or insignificant. But give with a pure heart, even unnoticed, and your reward will find you unexpectedly. So keep being kind, even when it hurts, even without applause. One day, like Ruth, your story will transform a life, maybe your own. This tale shows that kindness, even from scarcity, returns in surprising ways. What did you take from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And guess what? A more powerful story is coming soon. Subscribe and turn on notifications to catch it. If this moved you, hit the like button and share it. You never know who needs it today. Thank you for watching. I value your time and support. See you in the next story.